The incense smoke rose in a spiral so perfect, it looked like a thread connecting earth to heaven. The prophet Eliakim had seen that thread 1,000 times, each time believing it carried his prayers to the throne. But on this night, the smoke did not rise. It coiled back upon itself, heavy and unmoving, and settled like a shroud over the altar. He knew what it meant before the words formed in his mind. The seal he had returned to the temple treasury that morning, the bronze seal inscribed with the covenant name of his bloodline, had not been accepted. Heaven had refused the transaction, and when heaven says no to a prophet, the silence that follows is not empty. It is a weight that presses against your chest until your ribs remember they are mortal. Eliakim was born into a priestly lineage that stretched back 400 years, to the days when the first temple stood, and the glory of the Most High filled the sanctuary with a cloud so thick no man could stand to minister. His grandfather had seen that cloud. His father had only heard stories of it. Eliakim had inherited nothing but the seal, the bronze token that proved his family still held the covenant, still had access to the holy place where earth and heaven touched. But access means nothing without the permission to enter. You can hold the seal. You can wear it on a chain against your chest, warm from the heat of your skin. You can trace the letters with your thumb until you have memorized every curve and every edge. None of it matters if the door does not open. Here is what the scrolls do not tell you about a prophet's decline. It does not begin with a dramatic sin, a grand betrayal that makes the heavens weep. It begins in the ordinary moments, the small compromises that feel like survival. Eliakim did not wake up one morning and decide to break covenant. He simply stopped believing that the silence he felt was anything more than a test. He told himself that God was refining him, that the distance was preparation. But the book of Enoch, preserved in the Ethiopian canon and dated to at least the 3rd century before the Common Era, records something different. It says that when a prophet's prayers stop rising, it is not always a test. Sometimes it is a withdrawal. Heaven does not explain itself. It simply removes the presence, and the one who carried it must learn to live in the absence. Eliakim learned. He learned to perform the rituals without feeling the weight behind them. He learned to speak the blessings from memory, his lips moving while his heart sat silent in his chest. The people in the outer court did not notice. They heard the familiar words, saw the familiar gestures, and assumed the anointing was still there. They had no way of knowing that the flame on the altar had not been kindled from heaven in 3 full cycles of the moon. You know that feeling, do you not? The feeling of going through the motions when the fire has gone cold. You wake, you pray, you speak the words you have always spoken. There is no answering warmth. You begin to wonder if you were ever truly touched, or if it was all your own invention. That is the moment when uncertainty becomes a crack in the foundation. And through that crack, the demonic will always enter. The demon's name was Semyaza, according to the book of Enoch, one of the 200 watchers who descended upon Mount Hermon in the days of Jared, the father of Enoch. They came with an oath, binding themselves to one another, swearing that they would not abandon their plan to take mortal wives. Semyaza was their leader. He was the first to break the boundary between the spiritual and the physical, the first to feel the warmth of human flesh against his own eternal form. He was also the one who understood covenant better than any angel in heaven, because he had broken the greatest covenant of all. Semyaza did not appear to Eliakim as a creature of fire and terror. He appeared as a woman named Talia, a widow from the hill country, who had come to the temple to offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving. She was tall for a woman of that region, with hair that caught the light in a way that made the priest forget the words he was supposed to say. She moved through the court of women with a confidence that did not belong to someone who had lost her husband to the Philistine raids the previous spring. Eliakim saw her from the gate of the inner court, and he felt something he had not felt in years. It was not lust, it was recognition.
I saw you.
It was the sensation of seeing someone who knew the same silence he knew, who carried the same unanswered question behind her eyes. He should have turned away. The law was clear. A priest who looked upon a woman with desire and did not immediately purify his thoughts was already guilty in the court of heaven. But Eliakim did not turn away. He let his gaze linger, and in that lingering, he opened a door. You have just witnessed the moment a holy man recognized something in a stranger's eyes and did not. That recognition is the crack through which entire covenants collapse. If you want to uncover how heaven tracks every door we leave open, subscribe to follow this investigation into the sacred transactions that bind us. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt a recognition that you knew even then you should have walked away from? Here is the detail most people miss when they read the story of a prophet who fell. It was not the woman who seduced him. It was the loneliness in his own heart that made him vulnerable to her presence. The Talmud, in Tractate Yoma, records that the high priest before the Day of Atonement was kept awake all night reading scripture, lest he fall into impurity through a dream. The sages knew that the most dangerous time for a holy man is not when he is tempted by sin. It is when he is tired and alone and no one is watching. Eliakim approached Talia under the pretense of offering her counsel. He asked about her husband, about her loss, about the nature of her sacrifice. She answered each question with a sadness that felt manufactured to the trained ear, but his ear was no longer trained. He had stopped listening to heaven years ago. He was listening now to the echo of his own need, and Talia's voice sounded exactly like what he wanted to hear. She told him that her husband had died in the night, that the Philistines had come while he slept, that she had hidden in the grain pit and heard the whole thing. She told him that she had made a vow to the Lord, that if she survived, she would dedicate her remaining years to the temple service. She told him that she felt called to pray in the inner court, to draw close to the altar where the presence once dwelled. Eliakim believed her. Or, rather, he chose to believe her, because the alternative meant facing his own emptiness, without distraction. The Watcher, texts from Qumran, discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the mid-20th century, contain a fragment that describes how the fallen angels learn to read human hearts. It says that they can perceive the exact shape of a person's unspoken longing, and they craft their approach accordingly. Talia was not a widow. She was not even a woman. She was a vessel shaped to Eliakim's secret desire for someone who understood his loneliness. He took her to the chamber where the bronze seal was kept. He showed her the engravings, the covenant name that had been passed down through the generations. He told her the story of how his grandfather had once seen the glory, how his father had only heard the stories, and how he himself had felt nothing for years except the cold weight of expectation. She placed her hand on his hand, and the seal between them felt warm. He thought it was the heat of her skin. It was not. The seal had been cold since the day he inherited it. It was a dead object, a relic of a covenant that no longer existed between heaven and his bloodline. But when Talia touched it, the bronze began to glow with a faint light that only Eliakim could see. He interpreted it as a sign. He believed that heaven was finally responding, that the silence was breaking, that this woman was the answer to prayers he had stopped praying. He was wrong. The light was not heaven's approval. It was the signature of a debt. The demonic does not offer gifts freely. Every transaction requires a seal. The seal of heaven bears the name of the Most High and cannot be broken. The seal of hell bears the name of the one who accepts it, and once it is imprinted, it becomes a claim that even the throne cannot cancel without sacrifice. Maimonides, in the Mishneh Torah, codified the laws of covenant breaking with a precision that reveals how seriously the ancient rabbis took these transactions. He wrote that a priest who profanes the holy things of the Lord has severed himself from the source of life, and his bloodline follows him into the breach. The consequences do not end with the individual. They echo through the generations until the debt is collected or atoned for. Eliakim did not know the laws of demonic contract. He knew the laws of temple service, the rules of sacrifice, the order of the daily offerings. But no one had taught him what happened when a prophet gave his heart to a vessel of the Watchers. The curriculum stopped at the threshold of the holy. It did not cover the unholy because the assumption was that the holy would protect the priest from the need to understand darkness. That assumption is the reason so many fall. Talia asked Eliakim to give her the seal. Not permanently, she said, just for one night. She wanted to hold it, to pray with it, to feel the weight of the covenant against her own chest. She promised to return it at dawn when the incense smoke began to rise again. Eliakim hesitated. The seal was not his to give. It belonged to the temple, to the bloodline, to heaven itself. If he gave it to a woman, even a widow who had made a vow, he was breaking the chain that connected him to his ancestors and to the throne above. But she looked at him with eyes that held his loneliness like a mirror. and he could not refuse. The emptiness inside him was louder than the law. He unsnapped the chain from his neck and placed the warm bronze seal into her open palm. She closed her fingers around it and smiled. The air in the chamber changed. The incense smoke that had been hanging still in the air suddenly twisted into a vortex, spiraling downward instead of upward, as if something from below had drawn it into the earth. The candles on the menorah flickered and died, one by one, until the room was dark, except for the faint glow between Talia's fingers. Do you understand what happened in that moment? The seal was a conduit. It was designed to carry prayers upward, to connect the earthly sanctuary with the heavenly throne. But when Talia held it, when the Watcher's power touched the bronze, the conduit reversed. The seal that was meant to carry petitions to heaven became a gate through which something else descended. Eliakim felt the shift.
Something.
For the first time in years, he felt something in the chamber.
Get back.
But it was not the gentle pressure of holiness.
It's not holy.
It was a cold weight that pressed down on him, that settled into his bones, that made his teeth ache with a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Do not be afraid, Talia whispered, and her voice was no longer the soft voice of a grieving widow. It had resonance, depth, the echo of something ancient. You have carried the burden of the covenant alone for too long. Let me share it with you. You just watched a holy instrument become a demonic gate. The seal reversed because a watcher touched it. That is the kind of hidden transaction this channel exists to pull into the light. Subscribe so you do not miss what happens when the burden does not lift but doubles and heaven stays silent. And tell me, drop the word reversed in the comments if you felt the cold weight in that room shift. She did not say share the seal. She said share the burden. There is a difference, and Eliakim was too overwhelmed by the presence to notice it. The Watchers do not lie. They deceive by telling partial truths. Talia did share the burden. She shared it by binding it to her own nature, which was fallen, which was cursed, which was already dead. She did not lift the weight from Eliakim. She added her own weight to it, and because she was not bound by the covenant, her weight snapped the chain that held the seal to heaven. The seal was no longer a holy object. It had been profaned by contact with the Watcher. The name engraved on it was still the name of the Most High, but the power behind it had been severed. Eliakim had given away the one thing that still connected him to the throne, and in its place, he received the attention of the abyss. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the inner court, watching the sky lighten, waiting for Talia to return. She did not come at dawn. She did not come at midday. The sun rose, climbed to its peak, and began to descend, and Eliakim remained at the gate, watching the path from the hill country, hoping to see her figure in the distance. He knew she was not coming. Some part of him had known from the moment the candles died. But hope is the last attachment that remains when the covenant breaks. Even when the prayers stop working, the heart still prays. Even when the seal is gone, the hand still reaches for it. He reached for the chain that was no longer around his neck a dozen times that day. Each time his fingers found only skin, and each time the emptiness reopened. The elders of the temple began to notice. They saw the absent look in his eyes. They saw the way he fumbled the words of the blessing. They saw the incense smoke that no longer rose, but they did not ask. Prophets are not questioned until the evidence is undeniable, and by then it is too late. On the third day, Talia returned. She came in the evening when the shadows were long and the temple was empty of worshippers. She walked through the gate with the seal hanging from a new chain around her neck, and the bronze no longer glowed. It had settled into a dark, cold metal that seemed to absorb the light around it. She laid the seal on the altar. She did not speak. She turned and walked away, and Eliakim watched her go without calling after her. He picked up the seal. It was cold. Not the cold of a bronze object that has been exposed to the night air. It was the cold of something that has been in contact with death, that has absorbed the temperature of a tomb. He knew, in that moment, that it was over. The seal was back in his hands, but it was empty. The covenant name was still etched into the bronze, but the power behind it had been drained. He was holding a piece of metal that had once connected him to the throne of heaven. Now it was just a reminder of what he had lost. He slipped the chain over his head and waited. The silence that fell over the temple that night was deeper than any silence he had ever known. Even his own heartbeat seemed muffled, as if sound itself had been withdrawn. He tried to pray. He opened his mouth. He formed the words of the ancient blessings. But no sound came out. The words died in his throat before they could reach the air. Heaven's wrath did not come as a voice from the sky or a bolt of lightning. It came as an absence. It came as a withdrawal so complete that Eliakim could no longer hear the echoes of what had once been.
Only the silence,
the prayers of his ancestors, the songs of the Levites, the whispers of the spirit that had guided his line for 400 years. All of it was gone. He returned the seal to the treasury. He placed it in the chest, where the other priestly objects were kept. He closed the lid and walked away, but the absence followed him. It wrapped around him like a garment he could not remove. The next morning, the incense was offered. The smoke did not rise. It fell. It poured over the edge of the altar like water, spilling onto the floor, pooling around the feet of the priests who had come to minister. They stared at it in horror, because they knew what it meant. When the incense falls instead of rising, heaven has rejected the offering, and when heaven rejects the offering, the temple is no longer a sanctuary. It is a cage. The wrath fell, but it did not fall on the altar. It fell on the prophet. Eliakim stood in the middle of the court, watching the smoke pool at his feet, and he felt the weight of every prayer he had ever spoken that had not been answered, every petition he had lifted up that had fallen on deaf ears, every soul he had tried to save that had slipped through his fingers. The unfulfilled prayers of a prophet are not harmless. They accumulate. They become debts, and when the seal is broken, those debts come due all at once. He staggered under the
Eliakim!
weight. He fell to
Brother,
his knees.
stand with
the
us.
priests around
You
him
must-
tried to
Brother,
lift him, but their
help me
hands
lift him.
passed through
He's-
him
what
as
is
if he
this?
were already
I can't
a ghost.
feel him.
He
His
was
body.
still alive, but the anointing that had sustained him was gone. And without it, the spirit that remained was only a soul exposed to the abyss. The Watcher Semyaza stood in the shadows of the outer court, watching. Talia had been discarded, returned to the formless matter from which she had been shaped. Semyaza did not need her anymore. He had what he wanted. He had the moment of Eliakim's fall, the signature written not in ink but in the absence of grace. The demon did not follow Eliakim. It did not need to. Eliakim would carry the demon with him now, because every step away from the covenant is a step toward the one who waits at the end of the road.
And the prophet could not rise.
The elders of the temple convened that night.
What does it
They
mean
spoke
for
in
us?
hushed voices about what
The
had happened,
signs are
about the falling
undeniable.
incense, about the
And
prophet
the
who
prophecy
could not
begins.
rise from
The
his
elders
knees.
speak of what happened.
They did not
Of the
understand.
prophet who could not
They could
rise
not
from his
understand.
knees.
The mystery of a prophet's fall is hidden from those who have never carried the weight of the covenant. Only the one who has felt heaven's presence and lived through heaven's silence can understand the depth of that fracture. One of the elders, a man named Azariah who had
And
served
so
in the
the
temple for
Watchers
60
descended,
years,
bound
remembered
by
the stories
chains,
his grandfather
their
had told him
wings
about
like
the
shadows
Watchers.
over the land.
He remembered the book of Enoch,
He desired
the account
the
of the
daughters
angels
of
who
men.
fell because they
The
desired the
Watchers
daughters
fell.
of men. He remembered
And
that
so
the
it
Watchers did
Watchers
not
have
stop
not
when they were
ceased.
imprisoned. They
Let the
continued their
seeds be
work from the
planted.
abyss, sending
We are
emissaries
closer to
planting
the light.
seeds, waiting for the moment when a human heart would open to their influence. Azariah looked at Eliakim, kneeling in the dark court, and he saw the faint trace of a handprint on the prophet's chest. It was not a physical mark. It was a discoloration, a shadow that had settled over his heart, like something that had come in and made its nest there. "The seal!" Azariah
seal.
whispered. "What did you do
What
with
did
the
you do
seal?"
with the seal?
Eliakim did not answer. He could not. His voice had not returned, but his hand moved to his chest, to the place where the seal had hung, and Azariah understood. The Watcher had touched
it.
the prophet.
He has
And
touched
through
him
that touch,
and claimed
the
a
Watcher
soul.
had claimed a soul.
God
The
help
elders
us.
could not reverse it. They could not burn incense or offer a sacrifice that would undo what had been done. The covenant was broken on a deeper level than the rituals could reach. The only remedy was a sacrifice greater than the temple could provide, a bloodline that had not been contaminated, a prophet who had not fallen. But that remedy had not yet been revealed to Israel. It would take another 400 years before the perfect sacrifice walked through the gates of another temple in another generation. Eliakim's story does not end
Come
with
on,
redemption.
Eliakim.
It ends with a
Rise.
question. Azariah reached down and helped the fallen prophet to his
Thank you,
feet.
Azariah.
He led him out of the inner court, through the gate,
Rise,
past the
fallen
altar where
prophet.
the incense lay
Your
pooled on
time
the
is
stones.
not yet over.
He led him to
Look,
the edge of
Eliakim.
the Temple Mount,
Do you
to the
see the
place where
valley
the city
there?
of Jerusalem spread out below,
I
full
do.
of lights and shadows and the sound of distant voices.
You can still choose.
You can still choose, Azariah said.
The seal
is broken. The covenant is fractured. But the choice is not.
But the
You can
choice
walk
is
toward
not.
the city,
You can walk
toward the
toward the
people,
city,
toward the
toward the
life that
people,
remains.
toward the life that
Or you can
remains.
walk toward the wilderness,
can walk
toward
toward
the
the
silence,
wilderness,
toward the
toward
one
the
who waits
silence.
for you at the end of the road. His feet are still in the air, suspended between covenant and silence. This is the gap every soul eventually reaches. And the choice you make here echoes beyond your breath. Subscribe to walk with us through these sacred transactions, because your own story is still being written in the space between what was promised and what remains. Tell me in the comments, city, wilderness,
Which
or the gap?
path whispers your name
Which path
tonight?
whispers your name tonight? Eliakim looked out at the city. He saw the lights of 1,000 hearth fires, the warm glow of families gathered for the evening meal. He saw the temple behind him, the dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. He saw the roads that led away from both, into the desert, into the unknown. He did not answer Azariah. He did not have an answer. He stepped forward, not toward the city, not toward the wilderness. He stepped forward into the space between choices, into the gap where the covenant used to be, into the place where the prophet must decide whether he will become a demon's servant or a sacrifice waiting to be redeemed. The smoke from the altar finally lifted. It did not rise to heaven. It drifted sideways toward the east, toward the desert, toward the place where the Watcher had made his camp. Semyaza was still waiting. He would always be waiting. Because when a prophet falls, the demon does not collect immediately. It waits for the death that will turn the fall into a permanent possession. The seal lies in the chest in the treasury, cold and dark. The chain hangs empty around Eliakim's neck. The incense no longer rises from the altar. But the story is not over. The broken covenant, according to the Ethiopian book of Enoch, creates a debt that can be transferred. It can be inherited by the next generation. It can be paid by a sacrifice that heaven accepts, and it can be cancelled if the prophet who fell returns the seal with a heart that has been shattered and remade. Eliakim did not know if such a return was possible, but he walked the road out of Jerusalem with the darkness closing around him, and he held on to the memory of the one thing he still believed. He believed that the covenant was real, even if he had broken it. He believed that heaven was real, even if it had gone silent. He believed that the sacrifice required to seal the breach was still out there, waiting for the right moment, the right generation, the right bloodline. He walked through the night, carrying the emptiness, carrying the debt, carrying the hope that one day another prophet would hold the seal and not let go. Until then, the Watcher waited. The altar stood cold, and the smoke that had once carried prayers to the throne of the Most High lay scattered across the stones like ashes of a fire that had burned out too soon. The story of a prophet's sacrifice is not a story of triumph. It is a story of what happens when the weight of the covenant meets the fragility of the human heart. And it is a story that continues to unfold in every generation, in every temple, in every moment when someone who was chosen decides to turn away. The seal is still out there, the Watcher is still waiting, and the question Azariah asked Eliakim on the edge of the Temple Mount
to
is
every
the same
soul
question
who
that comes
stands
to
at the
every
boundary
soul
between
who
the
stands
holy
at the boundary between
and
the
the
holy
broken.
and the broken. Which way will you walk? Eliakim did not answer. But you can. You can look at the altar you have built in your own life and ask yourself whether the smoke rises or falls. You can hold the seal of your own covenant and feel the weight of what it means to carry heaven's name into a world that does not recognize it. And if you find that the wax is cold, that the incense no longer rises, that the silence has become a companion, you can still choose. The choice is never completely gone until the last breath leaves the body. Even the prophet who returned the seal could have turned back at any moment before the darkness took him fully. He did not turn back, but you are not him. You are standing at the edge of the Temple Mount, looking at the city and the wilderness, and the road beneath your feet is still yours to walk. The incense burns low, The seal rests in the chest of your memory. The Watcher waits at the edge of your vision. But the altar is not cold beyond rekindling. The covenant is not dead beyond resurrection. And the prophet who falls is not beyond the reach of the sacrifice that the Most High has prepared since before the foundation of the world. Eliakim walked into the desert. The darkness closed around him. The Watcher drew closer with every step. But the story does not end there. It cannot end there because the covenant is not a single thread that can be broken.
It is a tapestry that includes every generation, every soul, every moment of choice. This is the part where you decide what kind of prophet you will be. This is the part where the seal returns to your hand, still cold, still empty, but waiting to be filled again by a fire that does not come from the altar of the temple. It comes from the sacrifice of the one who never fell, the one who held the covenant with a grip that the Watchers could not break. The next chapter begins in that place. But before we enter it, sit with this moment. Sit with the weight of what it means to break covenant. Sit with the knowledge that every fall creates a debt that someone must pay. And ask yourself the question that Eliakim could not answer. Which way will you walk?